Hello, welcome to Stories in Time. My name is Eloise Schottler. I'm a storyteller, and I have an old story of my own for today. You know, when the holiday season is going on, we all look for the stories or memories of times before. Now, I bet if I ask you to tell me a story about one of the holidays that we're getting ready to celebrate now, that you'd have a special one you'd pull out. I have several, but there's one that always comes up first for me. It's the Christmas of 1949. That's a long time ago, but when I start telling this story, I'm sitting right back in our apartment at 814 Hawthorne Lane, Charlotte, North Carolina. Let me give you a little bit of the backstory on that. My father went overseas in 1944, and we moved into, my mother and 3 children, moved into a 12-family apartment house. We were apartment number 12, which was the last one on the left-hand side of the hallway on the 2nd floor. And that's where we were living. It had 2 bedrooms, a living room, kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom, of course. And that's where we were living when Daddy came home from India. Well, that apartment had always seemed just like the 3 Bears. It was just right for us with Mama and her 3 daughters there. But Daddy came home, and it began to feel so tight. Linda, Kathy, and I were sleeping in the same bedroom. We used bunk beds. I slept on the top of the bunk bed. My sister Linda, who was next to me, slept on the bottom. And our youngest one, my sister Kathy, slept on a single bed on the other side of the room. At first, it was sort of okay. And then I got to be 12. And then I got to be 13. And it was just awful to be 13 years old in a bedroom with 2 younger sisters. There was no privacy. There was a little room, but there was no privacy. I couldn't write in my diary. I couldn't write papers. My mother came to the rescue. She seemed to understand how much I wanted a space of my own. You know, like Virginia Woolf says, you need a room of one's own. I did. And so I had a small closet that I hung my clothes in, and she went over to her mother's, went through the storage house, and she rescued a small roll-top desk that had been hers when she was a girl. And she brought it back, and just blessings. It fit right inside that closet. Just right inside it, fit right under the shelves. I could get a little chair there. I could come in, sit down, facing my desk, pull the door shut, and I had a room of my own. It was very tight, but I had a room of my own. My daddy put a light in there from the ceiling. He just dropped a light bulb down on a cord so that I could see what I was doing. It was wonderful, and I was so happy to have a place that I could lock the door if I needed to, from the outside, of course, or that I could, when I was in there, just dare them to come in. You can understand then how happy I was when Mother and Daddy bought a little house with his GI Bill loan. They were building these neighborhoods of small houses all over Charlotte, and they found a neighborhood and a house that they liked, and they bought it. Well, there wasn't a lot of difference in that little house. It was a square house with a hall in the center. There was sort of a square in the center of that house that was the hallway. You walked in through the front door into the living room, and if you went to the left, you then went to the dining room and then to the kitchen. If you went to the right, you entered that little square hallway, and there was a bedroom on the front which was the biggest one. That would be Mother and Daddy's. There was a bathroom off of that little hallway. And then there were 2 bedrooms. The bigger one was going to be for my other sisters. And even though they were going to have new beds, the little room that the real estate lady called a den was going to be for me. And I was happy. Even if I had to have that old bunk bed in there and no new furniture, this was fine. Had a big closet. This was going to be just fine. It had a good doorway right on that hallway. There was only one problem. The doorway to the hallway opened, and there on the other side of the room was a doorway to the kitchen. And if this was the den, they probably meant that to be a pass-through from the hallway to the kitchen. Can you get the picture? My sisters, who were in a bedroom next to me, would come into that little hallway, open my bedroom door, walk through, and go into the kitchen. It was infuriating. This was violating all of the privacy I had been yearning for. So I developed this habit of, get out of here. And they would turn and go out the bedroom door, and I would slam it as hard as I could. My daddy would say, don't do that, Eloise. Don't slam that door. And I'd say, oh, I'm sorry, I won't do that anymore. And then I would immediately do it again the next time they came in. And he told me over and over many times. And then finally he began to get really annoyed and angry about it. And he said, I am warning you. And I meant to not do it. I did. But one Saturday afternoon, must have been in the fall, October maybe. We were back in school, things were fine, I was busy, I had my room where I could study. And one afternoon, it was Saturday, I was sitting in my room reading, and the door opened, and here they came to march right through my room to get to the kitchen. And I stood up and just pushed them right back where they came from and stood there at that door and said, don't do that. And I took hold of the edge of the door and slammed it as hard as I could. And then there was this noise out in that little hallway. Something was falling. It wasn't a good noise. It was a very scary noise. And I opened the door and looked out, and the plaster had split outside the door, and it had fallen onto the floor right at the foot of my door. No chance that anybody would miss how this had happened. My sisters stuck their head out of their bedroom, looked, and started laughing, and said, ha, you are going to get it. Well, I knew I was going to get it. This was not going to be good for me. And shortly thereafter, the door to the living room opened, and my father stepped into that little hallway, and he took a look. He saw the plaster on the floor, the stripped crack in the wall where it had been broken, and he turned. He didn't say a word. That was the most terrifying part of the whole thing. He didn't say a word, and he turned and left and shortly came back, and he was carrying his great big screwdriver with the big yellow plastic handle on the bottom of it. And he walked over to my bedroom door. He opened it, and so that he could get a good angle on the screws that kept those hinges together, and he began to unscrew them, and then he reached up and held it in place while he took the screws out, and then it was free. He held the door with one hand, he reached back behind, he reached up to the ceiling, caught the string, and he pulled down the folding steps to the attic. And I stood there in my doorway and watched as my door disappeared up into our attic. He just slid it right up the stairs and then pushed it. I heard it fall, and then he went up there and arranged it and put it someplace. He came down. He came over to the doorway, looked into my bedroom. I was sitting on the bed, and he said, "You won't be doing that again, Eloise." Well, that was pretty obvious. I had nothing for that doorway, nothing to close. There was a fairly large closet. I was back in the closet. There was a fairly large closet. That was my privacy. That was going to be my privacy. My clothes were in there. I was going to be in there to dress. I didn't ask for a light. I didn't want to open that up, so I didn't ask for a light, but I did have a very large flashlight. And I used that to be able to see what to take off of the rack and where to put it back and how to get my clothes on. And this went on for a number of months. I didn't ask to have the door back. I thought, I'm not entering into that. I brought that on myself. Well, I didn't think that at first. I thought he was really pretty mean. But I had brought that on myself to lose my door. And then we got into decorating the house for Christmas and putting up the Christmas tree and wrapping presents and putting them around. And we had a little get-together on Christmas Eve night. And then we kissed each other and said goodnight, and everybody went to their bed. That night, since my door was open and I could hear everything, I thought to myself, I heard those stairs come down. But then I turned over in the bed, there was no sign of light, and I thought, I must be imagining things. But the next morning, my sisters got up, and they came running into the bedroom, and they said, "Get up, get up, get up, Santa has been here, get up." And so I got up and came out, and I walked into the living room, and oh no, really, against the wall, right next to the tree, leaned up against the wall, was my bedroom door, and it had a big red bow tied around it. And when I got over there, there was a message. It was a card, and on the envelope, Eloise. And I opened it up, a Christmas card that said, "Merry Christmas, love, from Santa." And that's how my door came back to me. Couldn't have been happier, couldn't have been happier. It's one of my favorite holiday memories. So many years later, my husband and I were in Charlotte. We were all sitting around. Daddy was not there at that time. He had died, and we were all sitting around, and we're telling a little stories on him and then about other things we remembered. And I said, well, I've got a story. Maybe I should tell you about it. And my brother, my younger brother, said, "Oh, are you going to tell us that story about your bedroom door?" I said, "You can't possibly know about the story of my bedroom door. You were a baby when that happened." He said, "Well, I don't care if I was a baby or not. I know that story because that's the one that Daddy always told on you, Eloise. He loved it." So when you start telling your stories, find out who's telling them for you. It'll be very, very interesting. Thank you. Thanks for coming. I hope you'll come back. There'll be more stories in the new year.